Welcome everyone, my name is Nick. I'm a born and raised Canadian who has made multiple compilations of Pierre Poilievre, and this is my top 5.
Well, Mr. Speaker, the member is absolutely right. We did do a panel yesterday, at which point I asked, outside of the walls of this House, when the Minister of Finance sold his 680,000 shares in Morneau Chapelle. I also enumerated all the facts leading up to that sale. And I am absolutely confident that everything I've said out there and in here is true. Would he commit that if I go out and repeat my question in the lobby at this moment, that the Finance Minister will meet me there and answer the question? I tried asking the minister if he sold 680,000 shares on November 30th inside the House of Commons, and now I invited him to come and answer that question outside of the House of Commons, and I know the House will be disappointed to learn that he did not show up to answer the question. So, will the Prime Minister answer it on his behalf? Who was it that sold 680,000 Morneau Chapelle shares 1 week before tax measures were introduced on the floor of the House?
Secretary Parlementaire.
Parliamentary Secretary. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As I mentioned, the Minister of Finance has always worked with the Ethics Commissioner and will continue to do so.
Carlton.
Well, on October 28, 2020, the Finance Minister promised Canadians they would have deflation. For the Prime Minister's benefit, that means prices go down. Today, the Bank of Canada confirmed that we have inflation. Again, for those who don't think about monetary policy, that means prices go up. So everything they said would go down is going up, and everything they said is going up is now going down. Now that the Prime Minister has himself spinning in circles and saying his own name here on the floor of the House of Commons, will he finally admit that what we have in this country is Justin...
Honourable Prime Minister. And what we've seen is our economic recovery is actually better than most of our peers because we were there for Canadians. The Honourable Member for Carlton.
Well, the Prime Minister got confused when he was asked, what is this famous middle class he's always talking about? It turned out, he said, it's those people who live off their income instead of their assets. Except that inflation hits folks who live off income the hardest because their paycheck is worth less, while helping those people, like him, who live off of ancestral assets. Their assets appreciate and inflate in value. So maybe the reason he doesn't think about inflation is because he benefits from it. For example, can the Prime Minister tell us how much his mansion in the Laurentians has inflated in price since he took office?
The Honourable Prime Minister. Again, Mr. Speaker, we see the Conservatives choosing to focus on me when they should be focused, like we are, on Canadians. We promise to have their backs, and despite what the Conservatives say, we will continue to have their backs.
Here's got another one.
Is there no? Okay. The Honourable Member for Carlton.
Well, speaking of wealthy landlords, I have here the Financial Stability Report from the Bank of Canada, which shows that since this Prime Minister started pumping $400 billion into the financial system, wealthy landlords have seen a 100% increase in the mortgage lending they've been able to acquire.
Wow.
Cheap debt for the wealthy investor class, high inflation for the working class. You see, more dollars chasing fewer goods means higher prices. Does the Prime Minister realize that every time he takes a trip to the central bank, Canadians have to go over to the food bank?
In 30 seconds or so, the Honourable Member for Carlton.
One person is responsible for this mess, and that's the Prime Minister.
That's right.
He caused this mess by attacking Canadian citizens and taking away their freedoms. The rest of the world is moving on. Other countries all around the world are lifting restrictions. Provinces across the country are doing exactly the same, but we've got this holdout. The Prime Minister is hunkering down, and out of spite and personal pride, refusing to lift these unjustified and unscientific restrictions. If he would only do so, then the truckers could get back to work and the other protesters could go back to their lives and everything in Canada would get back up on its feet and we could get back to working on giving people control of their lives.
The Honourable Member for Carleton.
Who would bet their own money on gateway casinos? Well, it turns out nobody. Of course, the company was just downgraded to junk status, and its parent company lost 95% of its value on the stock market before being delisted altogether. In fact, financial experts in Toronto say the company vastly overvalues its assets. But there's someone who would invest other people's money in it. The casino just got the jackpot of $200 million from this government. Wow. With the financial genius over there who invested $200 million of our tax dollars in this failing casino firm, please stand up.
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
While the Conservatives play silly political games, we recognize the extraordinary situation the Canadians are facing. We're a few days away from Thanksgiving, and people are worried about whether or not they're going to see their loved ones, how they're going to make it through this pandemic, whether or not we're going to be able to gather for Christmas. And as a country and as a government, we remain focused on that. We're working with partners across the country, with premiers and provinces and territories, and continue to work with all orders of government as we deliver for Canadians through this pandemic. Let the Conservatives play games. We're focused on Canadians.
The Honourable Member for Carleton.
Speaking of games, you've got to know when to hold them, know when to fold them, know when to walk away, and know when to swindle a naive Prime Minister of $20 to $200 million of other people's money. Because that's exactly what Gateway Casinos has just done. They can't get money from anyone. In fact, for 10 years, their owner tried to sell the company, but nobody would buy. Well, we have new job losses of 2,000 people in the energy sector out west, 500 out east, 1 million Canadians without paychecks since the pandemic. Why is he throwing away our money in this jackpot for casino insiders?
May I propose that
It's okay. We can keep Prime Minister and I can continue talking.
No.
I suspected that might be a problem. It's very convenient timing for the lights to go out.
Look, I got a message to the effect that his power has gone out. I have no reason to distrust him.
I hope you don't pull the fire alarm now.
Yeah, well, look, there's no intent in my own private home here in the middle of a pandemic. I don't have a fire alarm. I propose
the general process is that the vice chair assumes the chairing of the meeting. So we'll continue.
And that would be me. So we'll continue the meeting. And I now give the floor to the member for Carleton. Mr. Prime Minister, you have. I'm going to ask you one last time. How much did your family get from this organization? How much?
Have you read the Conflict of Interest Act, Mr.
Yes,
Poilievre?
I have.
How does it define family?
I'm asking you.
How does it define
I'm asking
family?
you how much your family got.
The Conflict of Interest Act defines family as spouse and direct dependents.
Point of order. So you're not going to answer that question.
Point of order.
So you're not going to answer the question then. So you're not going to answer the question about how much your family received. Okay, you're right.
Older gentlemen, if you
for working with we, and it was cleared by the Ethics Commissioner ahead of time.
Okay.
Mr. Poilievre, can I welcome back Wayne Easter? Can I welcome back Wayne Easter, a man we've deeply missed? Come on, Wayne, where have you been?
Look,
I had things under control for you while you were gone.
I mentioned that, Pierre, it wouldn't be the first time you tried to put my lights out, and that's exactly what happened, Pierre. We got a thunderstorm here. Anyway, where will you're well into your 5 minutes, but go with one last question.
Mr. Trudeau, I'm going to conclude by asking you, you claim that you have no knowledge of the amount that has been paid in expenses to your spouse. You correctly pointed out that the Act defines family as including a spouse. Therefore, you know you're under investigation regarding the Act. I'm going to ask you again, how much in total, and I'm looking for a dollar figure here, sir, how much did your spouse receive in reimbursed expenses or other benefits from this organization? How much?
Your original question, Mr. Poilievre, was how much was my immediate family?
I asked you a different question now. How much?
Mr. Poilievre, the Prime Minister has the floor.
My wife has never been paid since I was Prime Minister.
Reimbursed for expenses.
Mr. Poilievre, could we please have order? We'll allow the Prime Minister to answer the question, and then we'll move on to Ms. Zerowitz. Sorry, Julie. Mr. Prime Minister, you have about 30 seconds here.
The Ethics Commissioner has fully cleared my wife to continue her advocacy and her work with We Charity and other organizations.
How much?
In the kind of work that she's been doing all her life.
Just the dollar figure.
She's doing it unpaid for We. She is not being paid by We for her advocacy or for her podcasts. They are simply reimbursing her for expenses.
Thank you, Mr. Prime Minister.
Let me know which clip you think is the #1 clip, and be sure to check out the other compilations on my channel.